Hi, my name is Liz Thompson, and this is a video for IME 315 Financial Decision Making for Engineers at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. This video is on overhead costs.
And when we look at the 5 areas that is covered in this class, this video falls into the category of cost of products. So when we've looked at this before, we've tried to convert all associated costs to make a product into a dollar per unit calculation. We've talked about labor and materials, and this video talks about overhead. So the 2 questions with overhead have to do with what else is needed to make this product, and then how do we allocate that. So the first question is, what exactly goes into the overhead costs? And here are kind of a categorizations. There are some costs that are sort of not direct touch labor that stay in a category called selling, administrative, and general expenses. And there's others that are allocated to overhead costs. So we look at these, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of costs here, and we'll look at why they fall into different categories. So these various costs are things that might occur beyond direct labor and direct material. And our question is, where do they fall? So the general idea is that if it supports manufacturing or production of revenue associated with a particular product, then it needs to be included in an overhead allocation. If it has to do with a higher level management of the firm and selling a general and administrative expenses, it's kept separate. So let's look at these various costs. The first is rent. Now, rent is associated, the bigger place you have, the more you can make. So it's particularly associated with manufacturing. Interest on a loan that you might have is not associated with manufacturing. It's associated with the management of the firm. Depreciation is directly related to the machines that you've purchased in the past. So that means that is associated with overhead that needs to be allocated. Accounting department, again, that is not associated with manufacturing. It's associated with tracking the management of the company. So that goes into the other separate category. Advertising, too, is what's considered a selling expense, not associated with manufacturing. President's salary, again, is up in the higher level allocations that are not allocated, that are continued in selling, general, administrative expense. Now, the maintenance of the machines, though, is included in the manufacturing processes. Supervisor's salary, so that's different than the president's salary, because the supervisor is somebody who's actually taking care of the management of the employees who are actually making the product. So you can see we've put this in the indirect labor. So this is labor, but it's indirect. Insurance, this has to do with the type of manufacturing you're doing. So it includes in this other expense category that's part of overhead. Sales force salary is, again, the selling, administrative, and general expenses that are included in the management of the firm. Machining oil is an indirect material, so it's not tracked directly, but it should be allocated in the overhead. And then fasteners, again, those are not tracked specifically in material costs, so they need to be allocated in overhead. So all of these products within this oval need to be allocated to overhead. The others are kept separate in selling, general, and administrative expense. So I've listed these here, and we'll just add them all up for a particular time period and then allocate them. Now the question is how to allocate those. Like you have dollars per year expenses associated with rent, depreciation, maintenance, all of these items. So how do we convert that to a dollar per unit cost? And that's the next question we'll look at. Now, there's various ways of doing this, but we mostly just add them up for a period, usually a year. It could be a month, but it's usually a year. And then the easiest method we've used is allocation based on production. So we take the total overhead per year and we divide it by the production per year, and that gives us a dollar per unit overhead. Now, there's other methods that company uses that we're not going to really cover in this class, but just know that there's other methods of allocating overhead. So we're going to, if we look at this at 25,000 a year, let's say we've added up all of those items and there's 5,000 parts that we make per year. So it's simply 25,000 divided by 5,000 and it becomes $5 per unit. Other methods of allocating overhead, so we've talked about production method based on production. We can also allocate based on direct material or direct labor, or a more complex thing, method called activity-based costing, or ABC. So in this video, we've talked about overhead allocation, and this is in within the concept of the cost of products.